In this video, I'm going to explain the use of sections, show you several different estimates, and how sections can be used in different types of estimates, okay? Now, this one I named the estimate residential estimate. I just named that because I'm going to give you ideas on how you might set up sections in Red Rhino to estimate residential projects. You can see that I have two sections. I have the estimate set up here with two sections. It's electrical and new wiring in the garage. Look, the most important thing you can know is the use of sections. What's important or most important is how does your client want you to break out pricing? Now in this example, it shows electrical and new wiring in garage. I'm just imagining in this or using this as an example that they want me to do some electrical. Maybe I'm bidding a set of blueprints or drawings for a residential job. But the owners or the homeowners asked me to provide new wiring in the garage. So they asked me to break that out separate, that price out separate. Okay, so that's one example. Now let me just give a peek ahead on something else. Or let me say it this way, in order to break out pricing separate, then I have to do separate material takeoffs for each section. Okay, and I wanted to, so I'd input everything for electrical in the electrical section, and anything that needed done in the garage I would estimate in this section, clicking Takeoff Edit. Now let me say, some people estimate where they break down room by room by room in houses. Okay, now I personally don't do that. I don't like that because it just takes too long. You have to count the plugs and switches in every single room, break all that out separate. You end up with a bunch of stuff broken out that you don't really even need. I just go count all the receptacles and all the light fixtures. I'm oversimplifying here, but what I mean to say is I don't break out pricing room by room. I just think it takes too long. I want to bang these estimates out fast. So first I just find out what the customer wants, and I break out separate whatever they want. Now, if the customer doesn't want anything broke out separate, my estimate might just be named electrical if it's a small residential project, okay? Okay, now I'm just going to give a quick peek ahead. In this example, there's two sections. After I input materials into each section, when I go to the recap, I'm going to go up here and click the recap button. It's going to open up the recap here. Okay, and when it does, I'm not giving a master class on the recap right now. I just want to show over on the right, it shows different columns, two different columns for the sections that I created. As I input materials, it'll show material cost and labor hours broke out into each section, okay? And then the other thing, again, this isn't a lesson on the recap. And you know what, let me just run through real quick. What is a lesson on the recap? You go to video, and if you're doing a residential job, you hover on residential, hover on recap complete. There's videos that you'd watch for the recap here, okay? Not getting into that now. If you're doing commercial, you hover on video, hover on commercial, and then watch these videos, okay? So I flew through that. Now back to our lesson here. If you want to input, or let me say it this way, when you have multiple sections, then you could or should or would plug in sections, or I should say expenses into each section, okay? Now again, the videos show you how to do this, but you see expenses here. If I really wanted to break out my pricing separate, I would go add expenses for each section here by clicking on these underlined zeros. Okay, this isn't a lesson on how to do that. Really just wanted to show you how it's going to break out pricing for you, and down here at the bottom it's going to show you the price with the total of each section. Okay, now I'll give you more examples of more types of estimates using different sections. Okay, now just a quick example. This estimate is named commercial estimate. Of course, if you're really naming an estimate, you'd name it the name of the project or the address of the project of the estimate name. This is, again, an example of a commercial estimate. Now in this case, I named the section electrical base bid, and in this example, I'm saying that the client asked for me to break out pricing for outdoor lighting. So I created those two sections. Very simple. Again, you could do this on a small project, okay? I'll give you other examples. Now here's another example of a commercial project. In this one, I might elect to name the sections the same as the electrical drawings, okay? E1.0, E1.1, E1.2. Now a lot of times some of your drawings just have details on them or items that you don't need to, quote, take off and input. So these might have gaps in them. There might be one E1.2 and then E1.4. 4, okay? There might be gaps. But again, this is another method. Some people prefer to take off, do separate takeoffs. Let me say it this way or re-say it correctly. Some people prefer to take off E-sheets and input the materials on those electrical drawings separate. And that way later if there's changes, it's easy to drill down in the right section to find the changes and implement them in the estimate. Okay, just another example. And let me say that a lot of times on commercial projects, the bigger the job, the more the more sections you might have. Okay, sometimes this gets quite complex, but Rhino will handle the complexity. It's just important to keep it straight that you have to take off, do separate material takeoff for each section. Next, I'm going to show an example maybe of doing an industrial type job, an industrial electrical type job. Now, before I go on and show an example of an industrial sections used in an estimate, I want to explain that a lot of times on commercial type projects, larger type projects, you might elect to break out sections according to systems, if you will. Like in this example, I broke out panels and feeders separate, okay? Lighting and controllers, branch, circuit, and power, roof wiring, and fire alarm, okay? So again, different applications for different size or different types of jobs. Let me go on now to industrial type wiring. This is an example of an industrial type estimate. Now when you're doing industrial estimates, a lot of times the equipment and the materials you're installing is very expensive, okay? You might get into 3 and 4 inch conduit and large copper wire conductors, okay? 500 MCM, 750 MCM or larger, okay? And again, expensive stuff. So in that case, when I'm estimating industrial, I like to break that stuff out separate just so I know and can get a handle on what my costs are for those different items. And in this example, it's just, again, the example is an industrial estimate. I broke out sections called 1000 amp bus duct, 400 amp injection mold, cooling tower, and punch press. So let's say I had to wire this equipment and I would break it out separate, input the material separate, and then it would give me a breakdown separate in my recap of each of those items. Finally, and next I'm going to do an example of structured cabling, okay, for low voltage. Okay, here's an example of an estimate that's low voltage or structured cabling. You can see the name of it is structured cabling low voltage, okay? So in this case, I broke out sections, just as an example. It says fiber from 1st floor to 7th floor. Horizontal stations for 27 cubicles on the 7th floor. Audio visual, and access control and security. So again, this is an example of a structured cabling type estimate. Now again, you always want to learn what your client wants and of course set up sections that way. But that said, then you have your choice. If your customer's just asking for one price, do you want to break things out that's good for you and your company? In this instance, you might, if you're actually estimating a project like this, you probably want to know how much you have in fiber and how much you have in horizontal stations and how much your audio visual is and how much your access control is, okay? So that's the proper use of sections. I hope that helps.